Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where we have conversations about how to elevate the quality of life through movement, nutrition, recovery, and mindset practices. And welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast. Your host, Brad Marshall here. Today, really excited to be joined by Lindsey Deppen. She is a like-minded individual in the mental performance field. She's got a really fun past of working with a variety of populations. And I'm really excited to dive into some topics today to learn about how she's out there helping service members and helping everyday folks optimize and perform at their highest. So Lindsey, thanks so much for taking some time to jump on the podcast with me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It's always fun to connect with someone else who loves and breathes mental performance. And it's always interesting, though, to me to hear their story of what got them interested in the field and how they found their way to the roles and responsibilities they have now. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story of how you came to find mental performance as a passion and what that looked like in terms of turning it into a career now.
Sure. So my intro to mental performance really started when I was in college. I went into college as an undeclared major, really had no idea what I wanted to do. Sophomore year, I figured out I really liked all of my psychology classes. So I declared as a psych major. Still didn't really know what I wanted to do with that because it's so broad, and just having an undergrad degree in psychology, you have a million different options. And I was a soccer player growing up. I played all 4 years of college, and my sophomore year during preseason, my coach actually brought in a sports psychology consultant who, Brad, I don't know if you know Meg Health from the CSF2 R2 program. She was actually the consultant that did some work with us because she was working at West Point at the time. And she did like 3 or 4 sessions with our team during preseason, and just a light bulb went off. And I was like, oh, this is what I should do. Loved psychology, loved being a soccer player and an athlete. And I just thought this is the perfect way to combine the two and to stay connected to the sports athlete world that I loved so much. I knew I was way too squeamish to be an athletic trainer or a physical therapist or anything like that. Medical field is not for me, which is hilarious because both my parents are in the medical field. So like that gene clearly just skipped me. So my junior year, I had the chance to intern at West Point in their Center for Enhanced Performance and got to see their sports psych consultants work with the cadet athletes, do applied sports psych work. And that really just sealed the deal that this was such a cool field that I wanted to be a part of. So after college, I went to grad school at Springfield College, got my master's in sport and exercise psych. After I graduated, I did an internship down at IMG Academy for a summer, which was the best applied sports psych training I could have ever asked for. Really opened my eyes to not only how much there is to know, just knowledge-wise about sports psych and the skills that we can teach, but also how to be an instructor and how to translate that information in a way that's digestible and tangible for people. So IMG was a great experience, but I also learned through that experience that youth athletes are not my jam, not the population that I wanted to work with. And so after I finished up that internship, I got really lucky in that the Army was the biggest hirer of people with a sports psych degree at the time. And so I think it was on the sports psych listserv. I saw a job posting for a master resilience trainer, performance expert at Fort Eustis in Virginia. Did a quick Google search as to where Fort Eustis was, tried to Google master resilience trainer. So I was like, I've never heard these words before. And so got the job at Eustis in the beginning of 2016. So worked with the Army in their Ready and Resilient program. I know it's gone through a bunch of name changes at this point, but was working in the MRT program doing resilience work, but also the performance and sports psych side of the house. And I was there for just about 8 years. And now I work, I went from Army to Navy. So I work with the Navy now with the Helicopter Sea Combat Wing at the Naval Station in Norfolk. So I am the mental performance specialist on staff as part of our human performance team that works with Navy helicopter pilots and Navy air crewmen who are the rescue swimmers that operate in the back of the helicopter. So been there for about 6 months now, and it's been so much fun, so great to learn an entirely new language. Going from Army world to Navy world was very different. Going from Army transportation world and like TRADOC world to elite performers in these pilots and air crewmen has been a big shift, but it's been a lot of fun. And I'm very lucky that I have a really great team with me as well. So we have our physical therapist and our strength coach also who are part of that human performance team, just looking to help people improve not only their physical skills, but their mental skills and mental readiness as well. So that's where we're at these days.
I love all the different experience, and it's funny how the world of sports psychology that we're in, while it's continued to grow, still in other ways feels small. Mentioning that you went to Springfield College, I'm a Springfield College grad myself, and it's funny how this small little D3 school actually has two different sports psychology programs. I was on the counseling side; they've got one on the exercise science side, and then coming out of that, having not crossed paths at that point in time, both work for the same program for the Army, and then both have opportunities to work with O2X and their human performance team. So it's funny how paths can cross within this small field that we're in. And you mentioned that the light bulb for you was back when you were playing soccer and having the opportunity to have a consultant come in. What was it about that particular exercise or that session or whatever it might have been for you that the light bulb went on, and can you give us a little bit of an insight into what the difference was when working with Meg as a soccer player?
Yeah, I think the two sessions that she did with us that I was just captivated by and was like, I love this were goal setting and confidence. For the goal setting portion, she had us go through basically what is now like the MRT goal setting model, which is funny to look back on. But she also had us go through like personal goal setting as well as team goal setting and really identifying like what values we wanted as part of our team culture and then how were we going to do that. And so like that really tangible, like what behaviors are we going to exhibit in order to show these team values, I thought was really cool. And it sounds silly that I was an athlete my entire life and I never really thought about the process of setting goals. It was kind of just, oh, I want to do this thing, I'm going to go do this thing, without really having like a process behind it. So just being able to kind of put that into context was really cool. And then the confidence session that she did with us really hit home because I think that was something I could have really used when I was in high school playing soccer. So my high school was huge. My graduating class was like 700 people. And our varsity team was very talented. The starting lineup of my varsity team, I think most of them went to play D1. And, I played D3 in college. So clearly there was like a difference in skill, but it was really hard to be a bench warmer in high school pretty much just because like the talent difference was so much. And there was that contrast with on my travel team, I was the starter and I was one of like the better players on my travel team. So it was really hard to go from like one extreme to the other. So I remember being in high school and being at practice and just feeling like I had no idea what I was doing out there, feeling like I didn't deserve to be on that field, wasn't sure how I even made the varsity team, didn't get a lot of minutes, obviously, unless we were playing a really, really terrible team. And I wish I would have had some more tangible skills then to almost like buffer my confidence instead of letting the environment dictate how I felt about my playing ability. Because then when I got to college, I was a starter all 4 years. I was a captain my senior year. So that kind of validated like, okay, you are actually good at this sport. But I definitely didn't feel that way on my high school team. So when we were going through the confidence session with Meg and we did a lot of things around like self-talk and the past mastery experience and everything like that, that was really, oh, I could have used this my junior year of high school. And so I was really able to kind of take that forward throughout my college career.
That opportunity to learn about some of this information for the first time, I think it's such a unique experience because those of us who get really passionate about the field and we learn as much as we can, and you start to suffer from this curse of knowledge where you just sort of assume everybody knows how to set goals or knows how to build confidence or knows how to bring their attention where they'd like it to be when they want it to be there. And yet it's some simplistic skills that not everybody gets access to or really gets an opportunity to learn about until the moment comes where it's like, oh no, like I'm in a pressure filled moment. I'm in a moment that means something to me. And now I don't have those skills to help me out. So it's cool to hear your experience of simple things like goal setting and confidence and what that did to propel you as an athlete. But then the next level would be, okay, well, I actually want to do something with this to help other people. So talk to us about bridging that gap. So there's the ability to go through the workshop, apply some of those skills as an athlete. What for you helped guide you or get you excited to want to go help others now with that same material?
I think we just have such a cool opportunity in this field and this job to help people reach their full potential and their highest potential, when a lot of times like we are the ones that get in our own way. So it's really cool to be able to apply this knowledge and help people overcome those barriers, which they may not even realize they're putting in front of themselves. And I also think it's really fun to be able to almost figure out the puzzle. So one of the things that I really like about this job in general and like consulting in general is every individual is different. So what works for me might not work for you, might not work for someone else. And it's being able to figure out like, how do these puzzle pieces fit together? And we're almost doing like self-experimentation. So in a lot of the individual work that I do now with my pilots, mostly at the moment, whenever we're kind of brainstorming things to do or skills to kind of work on, I'm always very open to like, how does that sound to you? Does that sound doable? Does this sound like it would work for you? Let's try it out for 2 weeks. And if it doesn't work and we need to adjust, like, cool, we can do that too. So I like the opportunity to have that flexibility and that shift, because I think we allow people the space to do that kind of self-experimentation and almost have the accountability where people might know what they need to do. They just aren't doing it because there's some type of like block there. And so I think we kind of provide just that extra push to be like, all right, I know what I need to be doing. Let me actually try it and see if it works. So I just feel like with all the knowledge that I know I benefited from it, I just want to spread the wealth and like, let's all benefit from having these skills so that we can perform at our best.
Yeah, whenever we get that opportunity to put some of those skills into practice and you see the direct results of maybe being able to achieve something, whether it's on the sports field, in the boardroom, or even just in your general life, it's like, oh, that's sort of a taste of what people are chasing or what's possible. And I want some more of that. And it's fascinating, you said, having this mindset of having an experimental approach to things, being a little bit curious, seeing how things work and operate. Because I've certainly found that too, when people come up to you and they're like, well, if you specialize in this field, like, can you prescribe me, what do I need to do to go from point A to point B? And when you try and have that conversation of like, it doesn't always work like that. It's not this simple 5-step process and everybody gets there. It's this unfolding of like, let's peel back the layers and figure this out and solve this together, which can take time and can take resources. So over the years, you've worked with a variety of populations, from military, probably having an opportunity to work with some athletes in there as well. How have you gotten folks to either buy into or be receptive to that idea that it's a work in progress, it's going to take some time, and there's probably going to be some bumps along the road? We've got these general principles and these guideposts, but how we apply them is going to look a little different for everybody. So talk to us about what your experience has been like getting people on board with that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because especially in the world that I'm in now, I'm doing a lot more individual consulting than I've ever done before. And it's very evident when they come in for an initial session with me to kind of nail down some of the hurdles that they're working through, or, you know, I have this like mental block. At the end of it, they're like, okay, so how do I fix it? What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, like, I wish I had a mental magic wand and could fix this for you today. Unfortunately, that's not how that works. And one thing that seems to kind of help with that is I equate it back to like when they were first learning a physical skill. So for some of them, maybe it was like, do you remember your first ever soccer practice? Let's say if they grew up playing soccer, like, Were you good? I'm betting you weren't, especially if you were a kid, you were playing like bumblebee soccer and had no idea what was happening, and your skills developed over time. And then if it's something job related, for the pilots that I work with, they're all in school right now to learn how to fly the 60 Sierra helicopter. So they've been through flight school. Now they're learning like the specific helicopter. And so I equate it to like, remember your first day in flight school, how overwhelming that felt. How were your stick skills on day one? How was your ability to communicate on the headset day one? Has it gotten a lot better now because you've had the practice? And obviously they say yes. And so I say mental skills work the same way. It's just like we have to build up physical skills. A lot of us don't just have the natural talent to be naturally good at a lot of the mental things that we want to work on. Some of us better than others, of course. But just like physical skills take time, mental skills are going to take time too. And then I usually try to empathize a little bit because I flat out tell them I'm the most impatient person on earth. I understand that like patience is really difficult, but this is going to be a process where we need a little bit of patience and we need consistency. So all of the skills that we talk about, again, equating it back to like, if you go to the gym one time, you can't expect to improve how much you can deadlift, how fast you can run. It's got to be a process. It's the same thing with training your brain. It's got to be something that you do intentionally and consistently. And so sometimes I think they leave still being like, okay, but really give me, what can I do right now and fix this? Because I have a week to get better at this. But then I think over time, once we have more conversations, they start to actually implement some of the skills that we talk about, and they do start to notice small improvements, even if it's something tiny of, I wasn't as anxious before my flight today. I wasn't dreading it as much as I normally do. I'll point that out as like, okay, we're making progress. I know you're not exactly where you want to be. This isn't the end goal, but we're getting a little bit closer. So also recognizing those small steps in the right direction.
I think it's always helpful to connect those concepts and ideas to other areas that they might have some experience. So if they've got experience working out, working on their nutrition, working on different skill sets and unpacking, hey, how did those go? Because most likely that wasn't a direct A to B process either. A lot of bumps and bruises along the way. And the same can be said for mental performance. And I think that does help with some of the buy-in as well. I know people want the quick wins. Like, I want to feel less anxious. I want to increase my confidence. I want to keep my focus where it can be. And there's, maybe little things we can do to get that quick win. But looking at this as it is a long game of, we're going to commit the time and energy and effort in a way that's going to support all the things we want to do and eventually the type of performances that we want to have. And I do think it's always fascinating when getting a chance to talk with other mental performance experts or even experts in their field of how they come to think about the content and what they do and how they do it. I think we come up and we get educated on what psychology is and what sports psychology is. And then comes the ability to articulate that to others. And they say, well, what do you actually do? What is sports psychology all about? So I'd love to hear your take on that. When folks ask you, what do you get a chance to do? What is sports psychology? How have you come to understand the field or what it is that you get a chance to do?
That's such a good question. It just reminds me of, I'm sure people have seen the meme circulating on social media of your parents trying to explain what your adult kid does for a living. My parents still to this day, I think, are like, what is it? And I've kind of just said blanket statement for years. I said, just say I do mental toughness with the Army. Let's keep it there. And now it's mental toughness with the Navy. And then we really get stuck when they get asked follow-up questions. Okay, what does that mean? So the way that I've come to kind of explain it is, I think I think Marissa Estep on your podcast used this example, like, I'm a strength coach for your mind. I think that's a really good way to explain it to people. And then inevitably when there is some follow-up, I kind of like to explain it as, I'm a coach who's going to help you get your mind working for you rather than against you when you need it the most, especially in like high pressure, high stakes situations. And so again, with the follow-up, when people are like, okay, but how do we do that? That's when I'll usually start to list off some of like the main topics that we cover. So I'll usually say that looks like helping people put their attention where it needs to be, when it needs to be there, deal with distractions, help people manage their energy effectively, especially over the course of like a long performance. And at baseline, I really just say the field is about what are you saying to yourself that's either helping you perform well or maybe detracting from how well you want to perform, and understanding how those thoughts and what we're saying to ourselves and the stories that we're telling ourselves are either helping us perform the way that we want or getting in our own way. And that usually helps to clear up a little bit of the confusion around what even is mental performance? What do you do?
Yeah, using the words there, things like coach, which I'm a huge proponent of, coach, guide, facilitator, of helping people's minds work for them. And then you highlighted there at the end as well of just like the stories that are unfolding, the way we talk to ourselves and how much of a difference that makes. And I think that's one of the reasons why sports psychology or mental performance or mindset can be such a challenging topic to dive into and unpack, because it's hard to see sort of the external results of that internal work. If somebody's working out in the gym, you might be able to see some different body composition changes if they're working on their nutrition. If somebody's working on a skill set of being able to deliver a presentation or a speech more effectively, you can see a progression in how they're actually displaying that. The same can be said at times for sports psychology, but it's harder because it's like you said, it's this internal game where to the outside eye, it might be like nothing's changed about this person, but the way they're speaking to themselves and the way they're showing up can be completely different. And that can be harder to get people to not only notice, but to buy in and then to move forward with that. And so along those lines, this idea of the story that's unfolding in your head and the way that you're thinking, how do you conceptualize it? How do you think about this idea of mindset? Because you hear so many folks out there who are now mindset coaches and working on people's mindset and how they think about certain situations. So how have you come to understand that world or that field, especially when people might come up and ask you about it, or there's different ways you like to train it? So what comes to mind for you when you think about the concept of mindset?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is how are you interpreting the world around you, and how are you interpreting your own abilities to handle different situations. And I think that goes for not just performance, but like life in general. So two of us can have the same event happen, but the way we think about it is completely different. And therefore the way we react to it is completely different. And I think what's really interesting, especially in the world of high performers, is even if people are handed evidence of things are going really well, you're performing at a really high level, the stories that they tell themselves leads them to believe I'm not doing as well as I could be, or I don't deserve to be here, things like that. That is something I've seen quite a bit with the pilots that I work with, actually, because they are in such a highly competitive environment, especially for those who went to like the Naval Academy beforehand. It's just 4 years of constantly being told you're competing against the people next to you. You need to be the best. You need to work on your deficits, work on your weaknesses. And that takes a toll after a while. And so what ends up happening is they get into this pattern of thinking of, I'm not good enough. I need to be better. There's always something I can improve on. I need to be doing more, which can be helpful, but can also be detrimental depending on how strongly that belief is held. And so I think when it comes to mindset, it's really about like, are the thoughts that you're having, are the beliefs that are now ingrained in you from that experience and being reinforced by those thoughts, are they moving you closer to who you want to be to lead like a high performing, fulfilling life? Or are they getting in your way and they're actually causing a lot more problems than you would want? And now there's just a jumble of things that we can work on in the mental performance space, all because of the way that you're interpreting the events around you. So I think it's really interesting to help people take a look at those interpretations and notice where those thought patterns have come from, because they've been built up over time. And the longer that those patterns have built up, the harder they are to change, which again kind of goes back into like, we're playing the long game here. I can't undo 25 years of the way that you've been thinking in 2 sessions, but I think it's really interesting to just get people to take a look at what are the types of thought patterns that I'm having on a regular basis, and are they working for me? Is the way that I'm interpreting the world around me helping me to like lead a good, fulfilling life, or is it causing more damage? Is it causing like a lot of anxiety and self-doubt and shame and guilt and all of those things? Because that's not a really fun place to operate in. So I think the mindset portion of it is really just examining like those types of thought patterns.
Yeah, I can certainly agree. The idea of mindset being the perceptions we have, and sometimes just what are some of those automatic perceptions of life is unfolding in front of you consistently, and a lot of it we might not have a whole lot of control over. So it's amazing to think about, what am I saying to myself? How am I interpreting the situation or the events I find myself in or the people I'm around or what I'm capable of? And all of those play a direct impact in how we show up and how we actually are able to do what either is being asked of us or what we want to do. And so many times we're not even really aware of what's going on in our head, that story that's unfolding, and whether it is truly pushing us forward or pulling us back. Is that a place that you usually love to start when it comes to working with folks who come to sit down with you, or workshops or things like that? Is figuring out how to build awareness of the story that's unfolding in their head or the way they're thinking about or perceiving situations? Or is there a different place that you like to kind of insert and start?
I would say for the most part, that's where I start. It's usually easier, I find, for people to start with like, what is the end goal? Where would you like to be ideally? Physically, mentally, skill wise, like what does that look like? And then kind of work our way back to being like, okay, where are we at right now? Because building self-awareness is really tricky and really hard. If you've never been asked to really examine what types of thoughts you're having, it's hard to put that into words sometimes, and it's hard to get in the habit of, like, I think about it like literally opening up your head and like taking a look at your brain. It's difficult to do that. And so sometimes even just asking people to tune into the types of thoughts that they're having is really hard. A lot of times people can more identify like the physical sensation or the emotion. So I see that a lot with people that I work with who have a lot of pre-performance anxiety and a lot of anxiety around evaluations, especially in the student population that I work with right now. And so one of the pilots I've been doing some work with has a lot of pre-performance anxiety around giving a brief before a flight, because he's got some past failures under his belt with that. So now it's just kind of become like a spiral of past bad experience, and his confidence has been super low. And I think one of the first questions I asked him is like, okay, so you're sitting there waiting to go in to brief, like, what are you thinking about? And he couldn't really articulate it. He was like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about like, I want it to be over and I'm nervous. And so it's really hard to be able to tap into what are those specific thoughts. And usually when that happens, I'll try to kind of tap into like more physical sensations first and say, okay, let's take care of like the physical anxiety first. We'll do some kind of, like mindfulness, breathing, stuff like that. And then the goal becomes like, all right, let's take a look and see, maybe now can we tap into the types of thoughts that you're having? Maybe can we even get them on paper? And now that they're on paper, what can we do with them? Can we try to refute them? Can we maybe use some like distancing diffusion techniques so that they don't have as much power? But it is a process, and it definitely takes time.
It's funny what you mentioned there, the how hard it can be for us to tap into the conversation that's unfolding, and how easily we can tap into emotions or physical sensations. And so many times we use those words interchangeably of like, oh, what were you thinking? And you're like, I was nervous. And you're like, was that a thought? Like you said the word I'm nervous in your head, or was that the physical sensation of what you were experiencing in that moment? And so sometimes just giving people that opportunity to tease those out and giving them the language that they can use to work through that can be a really powerful tool, especially as they're just starting off. Of, we're not trying to change anything. We're maybe not even trying to make anything different right now. We just want to get a baseline of what happens and have a better understanding, because we can't really make any true changes or decisions unless we know exactly what's going on and what we're working towards. So I like that perspective that you had there of mindfulness and breathing and ways we can start to bring higher levels of awareness there. You mentioned, a variety of skills that you've helped folks with over the years. I've found that folks tend to gravitate towards skills, concepts, things that they get really passionate about or things that they really love. So are there specific either topics or areas within your work that are really big ideas or concepts for you that like you get really passionate about, you do more reading around those topics, or you really kind of get into the weeds with them?
I would say the biggest ones that have come up, especially recently, have been definitely attention is huge for the population that I work with right now. So I've definitely been getting more interested in the science of attention and how do we actually train it. I actually just finished Amishi Jha's book of Peak Mind, and I'm on week 2 of the 8-week mindfulness training. It is hard. It is very hard to train your attention. But I think that's one of the things that is really important to me as a mental performance specialist is I'm going to ask them to do something. I should have at least tried it for myself. And it also helps for when I'm giving them the recommendation to acknowledge this is going to be difficult at first. Trust me, I'm right there with you, but like we're going to get through it. And I know this is good for me. I read all the research. So I think attention is one that's come up a ton. And then the other one that seems to be really prevalent, again, because it's something people don't intentionally think about, but most people do, is having some type of pre-performance routine. So I think just naturally, any performer is going to have kind of a consistent routine that they go through before a game, before a presentation, before a flight, whatever that looks like. But maybe they don't know the why behind why they're doing it or the intention behind having a routine. They just know, oh, this is what I do in order to prepare myself to go perform. And so that's something we've been working on, especially with the student population, because they're still in that really skill building phase. If we can start to implement these skills now, they're going to be so much better and just help carry them through their entire Navy career. So we talk a lot about like how far out in advance before a flight do you need to start getting ready? What does that look like physical preparation wise to do some like mobility and activation exercises to help your neck and back, because they all have neck and back pain from flying. And then like, what are you thinking about leading up to the flight? What specific things do you want to work on? What's your goal for this flight? What are your keywords to help reset yourself when you're in flight and maybe things aren't going super well? So it's just like little things that I think people know are important. They just maybe didn't have a name for it before. And it's something that they can really start to build on and tweak because they're flying so much that they can then start to really build a consistent, good routine to help them perform as well as they can every time they go up.
Those two particular skills, pre-performance routines and this idea of attention, mindfulness, I'm nodding and smiling because I love Peak Mind, and shout out to Amishi and her work and having shared some of those conversations with us on this podcast. I'm curious from your experience of reading the book and now diving into 2 weeks so far, what are some of your major takeaways? You said number one is that attention is hard. Mindfulness is challenging. So what are some of the other things you took away from the book or what you're experiencing so far?
Well, one, I just love that she broke down all the benefits of training your attention so well. And it's not even just about being able to stay focused in the present moment. It's almost the ripple effects of that. So how does that affect our relationships? How does that affect our career, our ability to regulate emotions? Like just the broad spectrum of benefits that we can see from training it, which is really why, of course I was on board. I knew attention was important, but especially after reading her book, I was like, this is really something I should be diving into for sure. And the other thing that I really took away from the book is the almost like individuality of an attentional practice. So being able to find a way to train your attention in a way that works for you. So I've had a couple people tell me, they've tried meditation and they hated it. And like, I can't clear my mind. I can't do it. And whenever I've had anyone tell me that, I'm like, yeah, that's that's normal. That's okay. Our brain's not really meant to be totally clear. And I think Amishi talks about that in her book of the goal is not to like clear your mind and be totally zen like a Buddhist monk. It's about noticing when your mind is wandering, bringing your attention back to the present moment, and just doing that over and over and over and over again. So I think almost just breaking down like the misconception around meditation and mindfulness was really helpful because it helped me explain to people, I'm not asking you to meditate. We don't need to like go totally zen and clear your mind because it's not going to happen. You're going to have thoughts pop in. Your brain's going to be going a million miles an hour. How do we just slow that down and maybe reduce the mind wandering as much as we can?
Yeah, if you were to, ask me the same question, that's why I get excited to talk about mindfulness, because that's a big passion of mine as well. And so what you just described and the way you outlined it perfectly captures how challenging it can be, and at the same time, the rewards we get on the other side of it. And it is fascinating to see how many folks don't like or can't stay with silence and being with yourself.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see kind of in the world we're in with how much technology we have accessible to us and all the different things that are pulling on our attention, that the ability to kind of put all that away and just be with ourselves for a little bit is challenging for us. And not even just the sense of, oh, I'm tuning into what's going on in my head and the emotions, but just like, I don't want to be by myself. I'd rather be doing something else. And I think that speaks to some things that we can unpack as we work through that awareness piece with folks like, oh, that's interesting. Let's explore that a little bit. All right. So meditation and mindfulness is hard because we can't quiet our mind, but we're just being with ourselves for a little bit. So I think that's kind of a fascinating piece. So I'll be interested to hear how your journey continues with mindfulness.
Yeah. And I absolutely am that person. Like if I'm doing chores in the house, if I'm walking from one room to another, I like have a podcast on, I have the TV on, I need like constant background noise. And so I think, I mean, obviously sitting there for 12 minutes in just silence is really hard when you've conditioned to yourself to not be used to that. I think part of the reason it's really hard too and why people struggle with it is just like it's boring kind of. Like in the beginning, it's just boring to sit there for 12 minutes and just focus on your breath. And I think a lot of us are really bad at being bored because we're used to just having a constant distraction. That's so funny. I was just talking to my coworker, Mike, about this morning of how a lot of our aircrew guys who are like seasoned, have been in the Navy for years and years, can't sit in silence and can't just sit there and be by themselves because they're used to the constant chaos. And so when I was talking in the very beginning about attentional training and mental performance, they were like, oh yeah, sure. And Mike was like, yeah, how many of you can just like sit in a quiet room and just like be for a few minutes? And they all were like, oh no, absolutely not. And he was like, okay, so you have some things to work on. Lindsey's here for you.
What a great plug, especially to help bridge the gap of like, okay, what's the point and why do I actually need this? And something you said there that I really like too is we have conditioned ourselves, and it's also the nature of our brain. Like our brain, when it's awake and conscious, is looking for engaging or entertaining or problem solving stimuli. So if you don't give that to your brain, it's going to go find it on its own and think about the to-do list coming up later today, or the TV shows you want to watch, or whatever else might be, because it's like, I don't want to just sit here. I want to do something.
Yep.
And so getting the understanding and awareness that that's the nature of our brain, and we can train it so that we can have greater levels of control over where it's focused on and what it's doing can be really helpful too. So you've been able to do a lot of fun work with a variety of populations, from athletes at IMG to the Army at Eustis to now getting a chance to work with O2X. What are the things that you enjoy most or excite you most about the role that keeps you coming back and waking up and wanting to continue on in this field and in this line of work?
That's a good question. I think I just love seeing people make progress, and also just seeing people like hit their stride. So I think a lot of times with the field of sports psych and in my role as a mental performance specialist, especially starting out, a lot of focus has been put on people who are not performing up to their fullest potential and like, oh yeah, go work with a mental performance person to like get you to where you need to be. And that's not the only thing that we can do. We can work with high performers who are already at a really elite level and just help them to like sustain that high level of performance. So it's really cool to be able to see people who are struggling, did need a little bit of help, and now they're implementing some of the skills we talked about, and now things are getting better. That's a great thing to see. And I like to think of it as I'm just kind of the facilitator for that, like we talked about. I'm just like the guide. I have the knowledge, I have the training that I can give you the information, but it's really what they do with it that matters and makes a difference. So I feel like if I just have even one little piece of that progress, that's really cool to me. I also think one of the things that's so fun about our job is that it's always changing, and we always have to get creative with the way that we're presenting information, the way that we're doing hands-on applied sports psych work to actually get them to practice the skills that we can teach in a classroom. So one of the things that I really did a lot in the beginning when we started with the Navy was bringing in a lot of different kind of brain training games that we would do after PT. So classic things like the concentration grid, or we'd have different target identification boards and things like that. I think those are really fun to like supplement sports psych training. But I think the really fun part is being able to actually be in there with them during a training exercise, during simulated what they're actually doing on their day to day, and being able to just insert little tidbits of mental performance in there. So one of my goals before the end of the year is hopefully to get up in a helicopter and be able to fly with them. We'll see if it happens. But that would be an ideal scenario, to like be in their training environment, be with them in a realistic setting, and be like, okay, what are we thinking about? How are you going to use the skills that we talked about? And being able to see those implemented in real time is really cool, because then it shows me that like they care about the mental training and they find it valuable. If they're like, oh, right, okay, we talked about a reset, let me try that here. So I think the ever-changing nature of it is so fun. We get to be creative. And I think one of the most fun parts of our job, and I'm sure you would probably agree, is just the people and getting to build those relationships and that rapport, getting to hear about different people's journeys up until this point, what their goals are, their families, what they want out of life. Sometimes some of my funnest days at work are just sitting in the instructor lounge with the aircrew instructors and just hearing them talk about their weekend and deployments they've been on and other things like that. So I think being able to just be in there and build those relationships with people is very much a privilege of our job.
Yeah, people are the heart and soul of what we get a chance to do. And it sounds like for you, having any opportunity to be involved in that progress of just making little steps towards the person, the job, the performance that they really want to exceed in is really, really meaningful. And then finding the creative and unique solutions and problem solving of ways to do that keeps you engaged and keeps you invested in it. I'm always curious, especially when folks are experts in a specific domain or in their craft. What are the things that either they're focused on or working on, or the things that they're currently trying to work through? So I'm curious to hear from you. What are those things for you that you'd say? I know you mentioned reading, peak mind, and mindfulness, but anything else that you're like, this is my opportunity to put the skills to the test, or things that I'm kind of challenging and working through to see how I operate in different environments or things like that?
Yes. My biggest physical goal at the moment is to be able to get my first pull up. So that's been an exercise in patience for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also been really good for me as well to like see. I mean, we all know it, but like to actually see it, to see that progress isn't always linear. So there are some days where I go into the gym and I'm doing my pull-up negatives and I'm like, okay, these are getting a little bit easier. I was able to hold it for a little bit longer today. Okay. And then the next week I might go in and they feel like trash, and it's just hard to hard to do that day. So I think it's always good to be putting myself in challenging situations, because it gives me the opportunity to take a look at how, like you said, how I deal with different like hurdles or barriers or things like that, and then can I actually put the skills into use for myself. So hopefully by the end of the year, we're like 6-ish weeks into the pull-up program right now. So I'm giving myself a very long timeline because, progress isn't perfect. And
that is one of the
then
more challenging physical feats to work
it is
towards.
so,
Like being able to lift your body weight up to a certain level. It is one of the most frustrating and then rewarding things that you can work to and accomplish. So helped a few folks get there on that journey, but they always ask, like, how long is it going to take? I'm like, it
forever.
depends. I mean, some people it's like their first month, and other people it's like a year, multiple years. So it's like, it's so hard to say what it's going to look like. But I think that speaks to the journey and being committed to the process and being committed to what it's going to take to get there.
Yeah. And it's also been a really good exercise in having a beginner and a growth mindset because I like all my strength is in my legs. I was a soccer player. I love leg days at CrossFit. They're so fun. And then any upper body day, I'm like, oh man. And I know it's because I'm not good at it. And so that's really an opportunity for me to like tune in and be like, okay, you're not good at it yet. We keep working at it. You'll get better at it. And I have to constantly keep reminding myself of like, look how far you've come in the 6-7-ish months that I've been doing CrossFit now. So I think that's another kind of thing I've been working on too, is I definitely have always been that kind of person who's like, what can I get better at? How can I improve? I need to like constantly be striving for some type of goal. But also being able to recognize when things have gone well and how much progress I've made. So if there are ever days where we do a CrossFit workout and it's just, push-ups, pull-ups, pressing, anything upper body that I'm just like, I'm the worst at all of this. I will intentionally sit after class and be like, okay, but think about how hard this was months ago when you started. Like, look at how far you've come. You are making progress. And so I think it's always a good opportunity for me to kind of focus on those small wins and be able to say like, all right, we're not where we are not quite where we want to be yet, but we're getting there. We're working towards it. So it's always good for me to be able to do that again if I'm asking other people to do that.
It's awesome to hear the reflection of when you see something that you're not as skilled at, how automatically our brain just wants to pile it on and how quickly that can happen. And it turns into this avalanche. But having the opportunity of maybe in the moment, maybe after the moment, taking that time, reflecting, people in our gym will laugh because I'm kind of the language police when they're like, oh, I hate this. I'm like, we don't say that here. Or, this is going to be brutal. Like, it might be, and we're going to learn from it and we're going to get better. So it's amazing that the language we use plays a way in how we show up and how we're able to perform, which is always fun to dive into those weeds.
Yeah.
So we got one more for you here. Something I always love asking our guests as sort of a close or a wrap up. A lot of folks, especially in your line of work, tuned into their values or their beliefs, kind of their core principles, things that guide and influence them. I'm sure you've taken a variety of assessments and strengths, personality assessments, things like that. So if you could describe for us your principles, your values, the things that sort of guide and influence how you make decisions and interact with the world, what are some of those things for you that really stand out or resonate with you?
I love some good values work, obviously. I think the biggest one for me is do what you say you're going to do. So that can be something as small as you said you were going to clean the kitchen tonight, clean the kitchen tonight. Or you said you were going to go to the gym after work today, go to the gym after work today. So I think that one has a lot of application, and that's very important to me, of having that follow through and committing to something that you said that you were going to do. And so I think that has helped me a lot in different fitness goals that I've had, or even just on the day-to-day for a work day of, okay, I said I was going to get X, Y, and Z done today, and it's within my control to get those things done. I'm getting those things done today. So I think even for some of us who might say we're not like the most disciplined, or we don't have willpower, or things like that, which I know a lot of people struggle with, I think that's something I always come back to as a way to kind of exercise that discipline of, I said I was going to do this thing, I'm going to follow through and do this thing. So that's a huge one for me. And then another in, values assessments that I've done in the past, a huge one that always comes up is just health in general, whether that is physical health or mental health. So I usually try to take stock and say, how am I supporting both of those either daily, weekly, or monthly? So I know for me, on days where I wake up just on the wrong side of the bed and I'm cranky and I'm just feeling off, I'll kind of ask myself, well, what have you been doing to support your mental health? Have you gone for a walk? Have you talked to people that you are close to? Like, what have you been doing to kind of support that pillar? And then from the physical side, like, when's the last time you worked out? Have you been doing any of your mobility and stretching work? Things like that. So I think it's really important to me to be able to like expand that. I'm sure you've probably read the book Outlive by Peter Attia, talking about like lifespan versus health span. That is super important to me. And the health span, especially seeing like older adults in my life and just not being able to do the things that they want to do physically, and just, some of like the mental gaps that are happening there. So I think now in the present, I'm very cognizant of like, what am I doing to take care of myself mentally and physically? Because that health pillar is really important to me.
I love that. So do what you say you're going to do, and health as two guiding sort of pillars, if you will, or the foundation for how you operate, how you interact with yourself and with others. So it's always fascinating to hear how folks respond to that question. Got to say, it might be a little surprised. I didn't hear any values in action come out from those couple that you shared.
I mean, listen, I can hit you with the honesty, authenticity, the love of learning. They're all in there.
They're all in there. They're wound or folded up into the other ones that you shared.
For sure.
Yeah. So, Lindsey, thanks so much for taking some time to hop on the podcast. It was super fun to hear about your journey and how you're impacting people and how you think about sports psychology and mental performance and how it's impacting not just the people that you're working with, but yourself and those around you. So thanks so much for taking some time. And if folks are interested to connect or learn more about what you're doing or what you're up to, are there different ways that folks can reach out or get in touch?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, just Lindsey Deppen, super easy handle. Or my email is just lindseydeppen@gmail.com. So those are probably the two easiest ways.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and look forward to connecting in the future here with O2X and other adventures.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Brad.